Hi, my name is Luna. I'm 67 years old. And this is a story I never thought I'd tell. But maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear it. So if you're watching or listening, I hope you'll stay with me until the end. It happened on Mother's Day. Now, before I begin, let me be clear, I wasn't expecting much. At my age, you stop counting on grand gestures. Life becomes keener, simpler, but nothing could have prepared me for what that day would reveal. Not just about my daughter, but about myself. That Sunday morning started like any other. My little yellow house just outside of Charleston was bathed in soft spring light. Birds chirped outside, and the azaleas in the front yard were in full bloom. It should have felt peaceful. It used to feel peaceful. But on that day, it felt like silence was pressing in on me from all sides. I made a single cup of coffee, set it down on the kitchen table. I used to make two, one for me and one for Bill. My husband. He passed away 4 years ago. And the house has felt too quiet ever since. I'd gotten a call the night before. It was my daughter, Madison. Her voice was clipped, efficient. Hey, Mom. We're doing brunch at Ryan's mom's place tomorrow. Vera's hosting. 11 sharp. You should come. You should come. Not. We'd love to have you or can't wait to see you. Just a suggestion wrapped in obligation. Still? I said yes. Because that's what moms do. The next morning, I got dressed in my best blue blouse, the one Bill always liked, and drove out to Mount Pleasant. Vera Sinclair's home is in one of those gated waterfront communities. You know the kind: white columns, manicured hedges, golf carts in every driveway. The driveway was already full when I arrived. Lexus, BMW, even a Tesla. I parked down the street and walked up, heels clicking against the stone path, wondering why I felt like I was walking into someone else's life. The moment I stepped onto the back patio, I heard the laughter. Vera was in her element, hosting like she was born for it. The table was set with floral china, mimosa glasses full, napkins folded like origami. Madison was right beside her, laughing at something, leaning in close like they were old sorority sisters. My son-in-law Ryan was flipping pancakes on the outdoor griddle, beaming like he was in a Sunday morning commercial. And then came the greeting. Luna. Vera called out, all teeth and hospitality. So glad you could join us. Madison barely looked up. Hi, Mom, she said. You can sit over there. She gestured to the far end of the table away from the chatter. The center. The heart of things. I sat down. Quietly. I smiled politely. I listened as they talked about a family ski trip I hadn't heard about. About Vera's art class and Ryan's new business venture. No one asked me about my garden, my volunteer work, how I'd been sleeping lately. I was invisible. Then came the gift exchange. Madison stood up, practically glowing. We have something special for you, Vera. Ryan joined her, holding a velvet box and a slim envelope. Vera gasped when she opened the box, a diamond ring, sparkling even in the shade. The envelope revealed tickets for a luxury trip to Japan 10 days. Cherry blossom season. First class everything. Vera actually cried. The table applauded. Madison hugged her like a little girl again. And then came my turn. Now for Luna, Ryan said, almost as an afterthought. Madison walked over and handed me a small paper bag. Inside was a plastic rose, the kind you'd find near the checkout counter at the dollar store, and a folded greeting card. I opened it. The card said, Happy Mother's Day. Underneath, in my daughter's rushed handwriting, Thanks for everything. Mom, thanks for everything. No signature. No memory shared. No warmth. Just that. I looked up. The table had gone quiet. Vera looked uncomfortable. Ryan shifted awkwardly. I smiled. Or tried to. It's lovely, I whispered. But Madison had already turned back to Vera, chatting about Kyoto and sushi tours, and I just sat there. Plastic rose in my lap, wondering when exactly I stopped being a mother and started being background. I stayed another hour. Nodded. Laughed at jokes I didn't understand. Drank lukewarm coffee from a cup that didn't belong to me. When I finally stood to leave, Madison didn't even look up from her phone. Thanks for coming. Mom, drive safe. And I did. But the road home felt longer than usual. Because that plastic flower wasn't just a bad gift. It was a mirror. And for the first time in my life, I didn't like what I saw in it. The drive home from Vera's felt like driving through fog. Even though the sky was clear, I don't remember which turns I took or what song was playing on the radio. All I remember was holding that cheap plastic rose in my lap the whole way. Like it might mean something if I looked at it long enough. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't get out right away. I sat in my car for 15 minutes. I stared at the front porch, Bill built by hand the year after we moved in. I looked at the mailbox. He insisted on painting blue so it wouldn't feel like just another street address. I thought about how many mornings I had walked through that door carrying groceries. Mail. Birthday cards for Madison. And how often I walked through it lately with nothing in my hands at all. Eventually, I went inside. I placed the rose on the kitchen counter beside a bowl of aging apples. It looked ridiculous there, standing stiff and shiny in all its artificial glory like a joke. Nobody was brave enough to laugh at. I didn't sleep that night. Something inside me had been shaken loose. For years, I had kept my mouth shut. I'd said yes. Quietly, I'd adjusted. I'd provided. I'd made things easier for everyone. But now I couldn't stop thinking not about the money. Not even about the gift, but about what had become of the love between a mother and a daughter. What was it built on? And if I stripped away the financial support? The obligations? The logistics? What was left? That question haunted me. By 3 a.m. I found myself in the home office that Bill and I had converted from a spare bedroom back in 1998. It still had the same oak desk. Same printer that made that grinding noise I never fixed. Same filing cabinet labeled with little tabs in my late husband's handwriting. And that's where I started. With the files, the first folder I opened was marked M. Anderson, Duke University. Inside were tuition receipts, laptop purchases, book lists, financial aid forms I filled out, even though we didn't qualify. I found a $350 invoice for new tires Madison needed after a flat during her junior year. I found the receipt for the used Jeep we bought her senior year so she could do her summer internship off campus. I added up the numbers. Then I moved on to the next folder. Wedding, M. R. Hotel bookings. Catering. Dress fittings. Florals from a boutique Madison had found on Instagram. I remembered how she cried over the wrong shade of peonies. I paid to fly the florist in from Atlanta to make it right. I kept digging. There were car loans I'd co-signed. Mortgage papers, with my name on the deed. A bank transfer of $50. Zero dated 2 years ago marked business support for Ryan's app that never launched. They'd called it temporary help. I never asked for repayment. In total, over the last 15 years, I had spent or gifted somewhere around $387. Zero to Madison and Ryan. And I'd never once asked for anything back. But now, Sitting in that room with spreadsheets and receipts all around me, I realized the cost wasn't just financial. It was spiritual. Because slowly, year after year, I had disappeared. I had become a background figure in their story, important only in how much I could offer. How quickly I could solve a crisis. How quietly I could say yes. At 6:00 a.m. Just as the sun began to break over the marsh behind the house, I made myself a second cup of coffee. Then I sat in the same spot at the kitchen table. Only this time not as a tired mother, but as a woman with clarity. Madison had not turned into someone thoughtless overnight. I had trained her to expect me to be endless. Every check I wrote, every favor I quietly fulfilled without being asked, every boundary I failed to draw, each one whispered to her, "Mom's here. Mom always will be." But now, I wasn't so sure. A text buzzed on my phone. It was from Madison. "Hey, can we borrow your SUV this weekend? Ryan's truck is acting up again." No, good morning. No, how are you? Just another request. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I almost typed the usual. Sure. Keys are in the Dropbox. But instead, I typed, "I'll think about it." 4 words. And somehow, they felt like a landslide. That day, I went for a walk down by Shem Creek. Something I hadn't done in months. The breeze was crisp. Boats swayed against their moorings. And I passed a young woman holding her toddler close while pointing at a pelican. I felt something stir in my chest, regret. Maybe. Or maybe it was just space. Space I hadn't given myself in decades. That evening, I opened a new document on my computer titled Plan Exit. At the top, I wrote one sentence: "How do I stop being everyone's safety net and start being my own?" And for the first time in a long while, I knew I was about to find out. The document I titled Plan Exit became more than just a file. It became a turning point. Over the next few days, I opened it every morning right after my coffee. Before the world could ask anything of me, I wasn't sure what I was building at first. A checklist, a roadmap, a rebellion, maybe a little of all three. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was something else, something quieter, but more powerful. I was done. Done with being the fixer, the safety net, the default option. So, I called Susan Bradley my attorney for the last 15 years, and one of the few people in my life who had never asked me for anything but my signature. Her voice was calm as always when I explained what I wanted. "I'm thinking of selling the firm." "Susan." There was a pause. "You built Anderson's strategy from scratch," she said gently. "You've poured decades into that place." "I know," I replied. "That's exactly why I'm ready to stop pouring." I heard her sit back in her chair. "Does Madison know she will?" "Eventually." Susan didn't push. That's why I trusted her. We agreed to meet the next morning in her office downtown. I wore the gray pantsuit I hadn't touched since Bill's memorial service. For some reason, I needed the armor. Her office overlooked the Charleston harbor. I could see the edge of the pier where Bill and I used to take our Sunday walks. Susan brought tea. "Walk me through it," she said. "Notepad ready." And so I did. The mortgage payments on Madison's house, still under my name. The landscaping contracts that kept Ryan's business afloat. The client referrals I funneled to Madison every quarter. The car loans. The temporary help that became permanent lifelines. "Luna," Susan said softly, "you're funding their entire life." I nodded. "I know. But I think they've forgotten that." She leaned forward. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm just stepping away." That afternoon, I canceled the automatic payment that covered Ryan's truck lease. I sent polite notices to 2 small clients, letting them know I'd no longer be referring bookkeeping support after June. I emailed the property manager for my downtown rentals and asked for 3 new bids on landscaping services. Professional. Clean. Quiet. But nothing stays quiet for long in a family like mine. By the end of the week, Ryan called me 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the text from Madison. Just heard you're switching landscapers. Is everything okay? I typed and deleted a dozen responses. Finally, I settled on just reviewing expenses. Hope you understand. 10 minutes later, she called. Her voice was tight, strained. Mom, what's going on? I'm simplifying. I said calmly, looking at everything I've been carrying and asking whether I need to keep carrying it. She was silent for a few seconds. And then, is this about Mother's Day? The gift I told you we were strapped this year. This isn't about a gift. Madison, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. It's about a pattern. It's about years of quiet giving and quiet forgetting. She exhaled. I don't know what to say. That's okay, I replied. You don't have to say anything right now. We hung up not as mother and daughter, but as 2 people on opposite sides of something they couldn't quite name yet. Later that week, I got a call from a man named Henry Mason, a broker Susan had connected me with. He specialized in small firm acquisitions, had warm eyes, and a voice like soft denim. Your firm's got solid bones, he said. Plenty of potential buyers. It won't take long. That should have thrilled me. Instead, it terrified me. Because once the papers were signed, there'd be no going back. I'd built that firm from my kitchen table, while Bill handled bedtime with Madison in the next room. I'd negotiated my first contract wearing sweatpants and a baby monitor clipped to my waistband. Letting it go felt like losing the last piece of who I used to be. But I also knew deep down that holding on was killing something else, my peace. So I said yes. We set the ball in motion. Due diligence, confidentiality agreements, preliminary evaluations. No one knew. And that's how I wanted it for now. One night, I was reviewing quarterly earnings when my phone rang. The screen flashed home. Landline. I frowned. I hadn't used the landline in weeks. Only one person had a key to my house besides me. I picked up. Hello, hi. This is James Morrison from Morrison and Associates. I'm calling regarding the Hartwell acquisition I froze. I'm sorry. Who Morrison and Associates? We're handling the review for Henry Mason's client. I was just speaking to your assistant. She gave me this number. I gripped the counter. My assistant, yes. She said her name was Madison. I stood there, still holding the phone long after the call had ended. The name James Morrison echoed in my head like a dropped stone hitting water. I could feel the ripples spreading cold. Sharp. Inevitable. My daughter. My own daughter had pretended to be my assistant. She had no right. She'd answered my home phone, spoken to a business associate, and inserted herself into something she had no business touching. But worse than all that, she had lied. Without blinking, without hesitation, I grabbed my keys and drove straight home. The sun was setting, turning the marsh behind my neighborhood, a soft orange, but I didn't see it. All I saw was the image of Madison at my desk, rifling through papers she didn't understand. When I walked through the front door, I didn't have to call her name. She was already sitting at my desk in the home office, flipping through contracts with red eyes and clenched lips. The computer was still on. My printer tray overflowed with copies of things she had no business reading. She looked up when I entered, startled but not guilty enough. Mom, she said quickly, We need to talk. No, I said quietly, my voice flat and deliberate. You need to leave my office. She froze. Halfway out of my chair. I thought Ryan might need some of the tax. Don't lie. I snapped. You impersonated me. You took a business call on my home line. And you pretended you had the right. I didn't know what else to do, she shouted suddenly. You're acting like you're cutting us off. Like you don't care what happens to us. I stared at her. Is that what this is? You think my silence means I don't care? She didn't respond. I have spent nearly 2 decades quietly paying for your life. I continued. College. Wedding. Mortgage. Failed businesses. Galopere. Vacations you said you couldn't afford. I've done it without asking for anything in return. Not even a thank you most of the time. Mom, I gave and gave. Madison. I said, my voice breaking a little. And all you saw was a bottomless well. Not once did you stop to think maybe I was tired. Maybe I was lonely. Maybe I needed you. Too. Tears filled her eyes. That's not fair. Isn't it, I asked? Then tell me, when was the last time you called just to ask how I was doing? Not because you needed something. Not because Ryan needed a contract. Just to talk. She opened her mouth. Then shut it. The silence answered for her. You were more thoughtful with your mother-in-law. I added. You gave her a ring. A trip across the world. You gave me a flower from the dollar store. It was all we could afford. No. I interrupted. It was all you chose to afford. She sat down on the edge of the chair. Eyes glossy now. So what, you're selling the company just like that? Without talking to me, I took a deep breath. Yes. Because it's mine. Because I built it. And because I'm tired of being useful instead of loved. Madison buried her face in her hands. You don't understand what this will do to us. She whispered. Ryan's business. The kids' school bills? We're already drowning. I crossed my arms. Then maybe it's time you both learn how to swim. She looked up at me then. Truly looked. And for the first time in years, I saw the little girl in her eyes. The one who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and draw me pictures that said, best mom ever in crayon. I wanted to reach for her. But I didn't. Because what she needed wasn't another rescue. It was truth. You need to figure out who you are without me. I said softly. And I need to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly being used. Pause. Then she whispered. Do you hate me? It nearly shattered me. No. I said, stepping closer. I love you more than anything. That's why I'm doing this. Because if I don't, this cycle never ends. And neither of us gets to grow. She stood slowly. Unsure. Like the floor beneath her had changed shape. What happens now? I finish what I started. I said. And you start something new. On your own. I walked her to the door. She turned once before stepping outside. You're really not going to change your mind. I looked at her. The woman she was. The girl she had been. The stranger she'd become. No. I said gently. This time. I won't. And I closed the door. Behind it? I didn't cry. Not right away. Instead, I sat down in the living room with the lights off, listening to the hum of my quiet house. Not because I felt strong, but because, for the first time in decades, the silence finally felt like mine. The next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. Then again, and again. By the time I poured my first cup of coffee, I'd missed 9 calls, 5 from Ryan, 3 from Madison, and 1 from an unknown number. I was sure was her friend trying to mediate. I didn't answer any of them. I just stood in my kitchen in my old college sweatshirt, sipping coffee from the chipped mug that had been with me longer than both my ex-husband and my assistant. It was quiet, still, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel pulled in a dozen directions. I breathed. The day passed like that. Calm, but not without chaos trying to claw its way back in. Ryan left a voicemail threatening legal action if I didn't reconsider the sale. Madison sent a long text saying she was blindsided and that I was destroying their lives without warning. Her words stung. Not because they were true, but because somewhere along the way, I had let her believe I existed only to be a safety net. That was on me. But it was also over. I turned off my phone and took a walk through the neighborhood. The sidewalks were cracked in some places. Children's chalk drawings lined the curb. I passed one that read, "You are stronger than you think." I don't know who wrote it, but it felt like it was meant for me. That night, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for something special. Funny how I'd spent my life waiting for perfect occasions, when the real ones, the truly defining moments, never came with invitations or neat timing. They came wrapped in conflict, in heartbreak, in hard truth. I lit a candle and sat at my desk, opening the final sale agreement for the business. My business. I signed my name with steady hands. Then I stared at the paper for a long time, tracing the last stroke of ink in my signature. This wasn't just the end of a chapter. This was me finally choosing peace over performance. Just as I reached to close the folder, the doorbell rang. It was nearly 10 p.m. I hesitated. When I opened the door, Madison was standing there, mascara smudged and hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes were tired. Her hands were trembling. She didn't speak at first. She just held something out to me. A photo. Bent at the edges. Faded. It was her at 6 years old. Me in a red dress. Both of us beaming in front of the bakery I'd opened on my birthday. I took it gently. Heart aching. "I found it in your bottom drawer," she said softly. I forgot. We stood there in silence for a few seconds that stretched into something sacred. Then she said, "You were right. I haven't really seen you in years. Not as a person. Anyway, just as a resource." And I hate that. I looked at her. Not with anger, but with something closer to grief. "Why are you here?" "Madison," she swallowed. "Because I needed to tell you. If you go through with the sale, I'll still love you. And I'll figure things out. Ryan and I both will. I know you're not doing this to hurt us. You're doing this to finally take care of yourself. And I think maybe you should." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. I stepped back and let her into the house. We didn't say much more that night. Just sat on the couch, side by side, drinking tea in silence. Not the kind of silence that used to exist between us, cold, expectant, heavy, but the kind that meant healing was beginning. The next morning, I sent out the final email confirming the sale. It was done. 23 years of building something from nothing. Letting it go wasn't easy, but holding on had started to cost me more than I could afford. And in letting go, I found myself again. 3 months later, the sun rose a little differently outside my new window. It wasn't a luxurious view, just a quiet street in a small coastal town in Maine. Old oak trees lined the sidewalks. The smell of salt drifted in from the harbor every morning. I had a porch swing, a tiny herb garden, and maybe, for the first time, a calendar without deadlines. I hadn't heard from Ryan in a while. Madison texted once a week now. Usually something small, a photo of her dog, a joke she knew I'd like, A link to a recipe we used to make when she was in middle school. She never asked for money again. She never had to. Because something between us had changed and money was never really the thing we needed to fix. One Saturday morning, I stood in the town's community center, holding a tray of blueberry muffins I'd baked from scratch. A sign above the door read, "Welcome to Second Chapters, a place for women. Starting over." I had started volunteering there 2 weeks after the move. Not because I had to, but because I knew what it felt like to be a woman who looked fine on the outside, while unraveling on the inside. I met women who had fled domestic violence, others who had aged out of foster care, and some who simply woke up at 58, realizing they didn't know who they were without their careers. I didn't give them advice. I gave them muffins, and time, and presence. Somehow, that was enough. One afternoon, after a class, a woman named Grace tapped me on the shoulder. She was in her 60s. Sharp-eyed, soft-spoken. "I Googled you," she said with a sly smile. I laughed. "That's never a good sign. You built an empire," she said, and then walked away. Why I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the scars time had left, the quiet questions in her gaze, and I answered her truthfully. Because I realized I was living everyone else's version of my life. I was respected, admired, needed, but I wasn't whole, and I wasn't happy. And it took me almost 60 years to admit that was no one's fault but mine. She nodded slowly, as if hearing her own story buried inside mine. Later that night, as I walked home under a sky full of stars, I thought about something I had read weeks earlier in an old, forgotten book on my shelf. Sometimes the loudest act of courage isn't roaring into battle. It's whispering, "Enough," and choosing to walk away. I had whispered enough. And in doing so, I had finally stepped into a version of life that felt like mine. I wasn't a mother first, a business owner second, a problem solver third. I was just Luna, a woman who had fallen, shattered, lost, but not broken. A woman who had been taught her whole life to give, and had finally learned to receive. And in that receiving, in that slowing down, I discovered something wild and holy. Peace. Not the kind that comes wrapped in ribbon, but the kind you earn by facing every version of yourself that you once tried to silence. You know, if you're listening to this right now and you feel like your life has become a job title, or a role, or a routine, you're not alone. If you're the one who keeps everything together for everyone else, if your name only comes up when someone needs something, if you're afraid that stopping even for a moment might unravel everything, then maybe this story was meant for you. Because sometimes, starting over isn't about moving somewhere new. It's about finally moving back to yourself. And maybe, just maybe, the most powerful thing you'll ever do isn't to build more, fix more, achieve more. Maybe it's to let go and remember who you were before the world told you who to be.